Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Phoenix Mystery School podcast. Today, we will be discussing cord cutting because it is a very popular technique. And of course, it is something that I have utilized for myself and in my practice, but I've always done it differently than how it's traditionally taught. And for quite some time, I actually resisted any sense of cord cutting because I did not like the principles behind it. So for me, I found a way for me that was original and that worked for me. I know plenty of other people do it this way too. And it's great because so many are on the same wavelength with this. And if the original cord cutting works for you, then by all means, because I don't like setting hard and fast rules, just noticing if something doesn't work for you, maybe there's a different way of doing it that's actually more beneficial to who you are. So in this stance, the way I was traditionally taught about cord cutting was to literally take a sword or a pair of scissors and cut the energetic tie between you and another person. And from what I understood and what I was told is that energy, whatever is left over, will basically die and fall out of your system. It would dissolve over time. But it's something that I just couldn't get on board with for myself. Mostly because the cords would keep regrowing and reattaching. And the reason being that I think is because usually we're so fixated on the other invasive energy, on the other person, that we forget to do some self-reflection. If someone else's invasive energy is entering our field, then this must mean we have an agreement somewhere. Things only land in our energy field when we have an agreement. And when you see patterns over and over and over, this is where you know there's something on your end that's also attaching to it. Things don't just happen to us. And over my whole lifetime of crazy abuse and all of these things, I started to realize as an adult what it is I was energetically feeding into. No, I don't think we attract abuse and things like that. So please don't infer that out of what I just said. But usually we have an agreement to someone else's behavior or someone else's intimidation, someone else's whatever it is, right? For example, if we have an invasive energy in our body coming from someone and it's angry, it's volatile, then what part of us feels like we were in the wrong to elicit that anger? Maybe we feel responsible in some way. Or maybe we're people pleasing. And this is very, very common when it comes to when other people express their anger, that many of us who might not be in our full power might say, what did I do wrong? And take responsibility for the whole situation instead of taking a step back, looking at it with a neutral lens and saying, okay, what was it that I did? How did that upset them? Have a conversation with the person. If all they want to do is just project blame onto you, and if doing nonviolent communication doesn't solve anything, then they've also got their work to do. And even if they're not in your life and you can't have those conversations, you can still look at, what is my agreement to this? Am I involved in the drama of it? Do I feel like it's my responsibility? And we have a certain level of responsibility in our interactions for sure. But we don't take 100% of the blame for when communication breaks down or there's a misunderstanding. That's why healthy communication is key. So again, if someone's projecting their anger, what is your agreement to it? What do you believe about that anger? Do you feel inadequate? Do you feel weak against this person? Do you feel controlled by this person? And remember, I said feel controlled. Once you step into your power, no one can really control you at all. Everyone is just responsible for their reactions, for their response, for how they show up in life. So being very honest with self without judging self either. So instead of going into this place of, completely self-judgment of, why did I do that? Why am I so terrible? Why am I so wrong? being honest and also compassionate with what your agreement is. And once you know what that agreement is, you can actually end it. You can start seeing, where am I acting this way in life? How am I showing up in this way? And choose to show up differently. So if you're always people pleasing, trying to make everyone else happy, start by day to day putting yourself first just a little bit more each day. Also, take into consideration your needs. Maybe not apologizing for things that are not actually your fault. Maybe not taking the blame for everything. Not being overly accountable. There's also the opposite of where people take zero accountability. So you might have to look into, where do I need to be more accountable? So for me, with cord removals, it's about getting to your internal agreement first. You need to know what it is that you're attached to within before that energy lands. We can look at things like our greatest teacher. And when you start to realize that you do have that sense of power for yourself, you can look at that agreement, figure out what it is, and energetically pull it out. I like to see cords like it's a hair follicle. As weird as that description is, you know what a hair follicle looks like. There's the root of that hair piece. So for me, the agreement is that root that's in whatever part that you feel in your body. And once you identify it and release it, the whole root just pops out and you're left kind of with that energetic hole. And that's when you have to fill that place with the opposite of that agreement. So if it's self-doubt, you're going to fill it with confidence or love, whatever makes sense to you, and then start acting from that place. And you can release the energy from the other person with love. I even like to add gratitude and thanks, because I've learned a lot about myself through that experience, as crappy as the experiences may be. So remember this with cords, is that there's so much more to it. You can't just take an energetic knife and slice through it and voila, you're cured. There is so much more in depth there. Sometimes for people, though, that's all they need. And subconsciously, they're aware of what that agreement is, and they are different from there. But most of the time, majority of us will have to figure out why it's there. Otherwise, the pattern keeps repeating no matter how many times you cut that cord. Why does it keep showing up? Why is it the same thing, the same person, the same experience over and over and over and over? And this is why a lot of people don't like to take self-responsibility, because it requires self-honesty. It really, truly requires you to be honest with yourself and to not engage in full 100% blame on either end. This doesn't mean you look at the situation and say, oh, it's my fault this person did this to me. You can look at the situation and say, hey, the actions of that person does not fit my value system. I've attempted to remedy this. I've attempted to set boundaries. I've attempted to have a conversation, and there hasn't been a solution or movement forward. Therefore, I can take a step back. I can release myself from this agreement and move on. Yes, it sounds easier than how it is. And it's not going to always be easy, but you have to recognize when things are in value and when things are not. It's really difficult to do. But you also have to realize, what is your own personal truth that you might be hiding or using for too much judgment. It's such a big piece to play when you start to look at the ego's systems and how it wants to over-identify with literally anything. Over-identify with the agreements, over-identify with the type of person you are or what actions you are taking and place it on other people. So remember, everyone has free will choice. Everyone has the ability to choose for themselves. Everyone has the ability to communicate or not. And it's up to you with what is okay for you and what is not okay for you. And you'll know when things aren't okay and out of alignment, when there's issues going on in the body, when you don't feel good majority of the time, you don't have energy. There's usually an energetic link to so many of these things. So remember, when you're doing cord removals, to make sure you take a look at your end of the cord. To not judge, to understand what that might be for you. Maybe you're addicted to suffering. Maybe you're addicted to the drama. And that's okay. Hello, I've been there. Most of us have been there, and not to negate how you're feeling, but just so you don't feel alone in those feelings. And no action every day is going to be perfect. But once you start to take action and see the result, you'll understand. And it will become easier, even if it is taking you out of your comfort zone. Growth is not easy. Growth is hard. One of the hardest things you will do. But if you want these patterns to end, you have to understand in how you're connecting to that said pattern. And that's when you are so much more connected to your own internal power and knowing what is best for you and how to create beautiful connections. And if there is a connection that happens that isn't the best, that isn't healthy, that it is something you need to release, don't make it a story about how you should have known better or how your discernment should have been better. Take it for what it is, because people change over time as well. People's intentions change, their goals change, their visions change, and connections change. And once those connections change, sometimes you're no longer relating. Sometimes your vibrational match goes out of match. And you can match energetically with someone who's not in alignment if you're not in alignment, right? So remember, vibrational match doesn't always mean alignment. It just kind of shows you where your energy is in that moment if you're seeing it as a pattern. So hopefully around cord removals, this has been helpful. And of course, if you would like a guided way into how to do this, I do have a cord removal training that you can purchase for a low price. It's only $40 Canadian. And it's something that you can re-listen to and watch over and over, but it is a training. It does give you a guide on how to do those safe removals so that you can end that blame cycle, be more self-responsible, and take less responsibility for other people while also taking responsibility for you and what is yours. Nothing less, nothing more. So if you would like that training, you can either email me at trinitysage333@gmail.com or find me on Instagram under Phoenix Mystery School. You can also find me on Facebook under Cassandra.finch28. And you can just request a cord removal training. But I hope you did get some value out of this podcast and just a different perspective on cord removals and how they might work differently for you if the traditional way doesn't seem to work. It's similar to things like affirmations. There's different ways in doing them so that they actually resonate more with your subconscious mind. But there's a different style for every person. There's not one thing that's 100%. But if this is resonating and it feels like a fit, please reach out. Otherwise, just take what you've learned from this episode and apply it for yourself and see how different things can be. So much gratitude for you all listening and supporting my podcast. I'll catch you on the next episode.